Hello and welcome to Get Good. This is the next video I'm doing on this Votann hero, and in this one I will be painting some of the black elements on the model, or very dark purple. I've chosen to do the boots in black, and I did one of the boots at first just to test the colors out and see if I actually like the look of it. And yeah, I find it works fairly well. In this video, I will be painting the helmet too. And the helmet I'm much more unsure of, if I actually really like the look of it. Not that I don't like the look of it when it's finished, but it has to work with the Mini too. But I'll get to that when I paint there. I'll talk a bit about it. I'm using an Artist Opus S size 0 brush in this video, and it is a bit worn, which means it is a bit thinner than a fresh one would be, but it has the same tip. The details on this model, well, basically any Warhammer model is pretty small and pretty crisp. So for a clean look, it's quite important that you have a very sharp brush. It doesn't have to be small in size, but the tip has to be quite sharp. Otherwise, it can be hard to get to it. At least to the level I'm painting here. This is not a competition piece, so this is just me having a bit more fun with color on a model and testing out some things and seeing what works and, well, also what doesn't. But I do take it to a fairly high standard in terms of detail and blending too. You can see how I've already done the armor, which means the rest of the model will follow basically what I've started there, in the sense that if you put like a lot of care into one area of the model, I generally like to keep consistent with that. Here you can see I found a speck. I think maybe it is a bit of dust or something that got on the boot as I had the primer, and then I painted over the primer, and I think something got caught. I think I've said it before, but I really recommend that you just fix it as soon as you see it. Don't wait and see, and maybe you can cover it, and maybe just fix it. Sometimes that means having to cut something or scrape something or file something or gap fill something or whatever it is, but I would always recommend just fix it. As I'm voicing this video, I am working on my Golden Demon entry Bastion, and I dropped it on the floor. It wasn't a huge setback. It broke a couple of spikes and only the tip of it, but it was enough to be noticeable, especially for competition. And even then I was debating if I should go and fix it, but well, in the end I did, and I felt 100% better. It was the right thing to do, no doubt about it. And that's why I'm saying, just fix it. If it's for display or for something, like if it's a tabletop model, of course not. But if it's something where you want to take it to a competition or even go like more all out on a display piece, fix these things. So yeah, Artist Opus. I'm painting with 2x magnification because it really helps me see the details. I would recommend that for anyone to maybe not use it all the time, but at least when you need to blend stuff out or do sharp lines or small marks, or like when you're painting eyes or gems or whatever, I recommend it. I'm using a Redgrass wet palette. I don't really think there is a huge difference between brands, but I'm using a Redgrass one. And the paper I have on top is Reynolds parchment paper. It's another thing. I recommend it to anyone. A wet palette for me really makes it even possible to paint. I'm in an apartment where it's pretty hot and pretty dry. Of course, mainly during the summer, but it is dry during the winter too. And that means without a wet palette, it dries out instantly almost. So I could not be without it. Maybe if you're in a very humid climate, you wouldn't need it as much. But I definitely can't live without. And if you haven't tried one, I would recommend so. You don't have to buy one. You can build one fairly easily too, just by using a Tupperware plastic container and some sponges and some parchment paper. It takes a bit of getting used to, of course, but yeah, as I said, that's another thing I recommend. So a wet palette, nice sable brush, and some magnification for the details, and you've basically set yourself up for the success if you keep at it. At least you're not fighting on those parameters. So talking a bit about these black areas, or well, they are kind of purpley. I'll run through the colors quickly. All the way to the right, I have a dot of black. I can't remember exactly, and it shouldn't matter at all. I think it was Citadel black, but it shouldn't really matter. It's just a black. Next one is rubber black from AK, and then besides that I have laser magenta from AK. Those two I basically used to make the mix puddle you saw I just dipped in. So the laser magenta is very, very saturated, and that means when I put into that laser magenta some, not black, it is rubber black, which is a really, really dark gray. It desaturates it quite a bit, but it gets that like purple magenta-ish look to it, kind of a bit of a sheen, and there is a reason for that. The reason is that I have already magenta shadows on the orange armor. So to tie things a bit together, my thinking is that I can use that same magenta within the black or dark gray boots and details. That should tie everything together nicely. And that's why I've chosen that for the boots, and I will be painting the same onto the helmet. To basically go a step further in highlighting, I have the next color all the way to the left. I have a Citadel Demonette Hide. It's also a very desaturated magenta. It has a ton of gray in it, and when you apply it, it looks mostly gray, but not fully. So it is actually a natural step to highlight that dark desaturated magenta with. That color works also if you do purple or magenta-ish cloaks or other details. It's actually a great highlight color for that, even though it is not a gray, but it is fairly close to a gray. And as I said, when it's applied, it looks even a bit more gray than it does on the wet palette. Later on, I will be adding a dot of AK blue gray, and I just use that to mix in for like a tiny dot of even brighter highlight. It doesn't really matter what color that is. Just anything light, and I'd say grayish or bluish, or even it could have a tiny bit of green in it or something like that. So as long as it is a fairly cold color. Here you can see I start by building up like the transition from the dark mixed magenta to the Demonette Hide, and then I kind of cut into that. So this is a trick you can do, and I do it all the time. If you have an area where you want to make an edge highlight, but the area isn't that big, so it really matters the size of that edge highlight. You can kind of paint the edge highlight on, and then you can cut into that edge highlight afterwards. So basically slimming it down by using, well, I was using a bit of black just to paint over, and a bit of that magenta, dark magenta mix. I recommend that all the time, because it just makes it so that you can basically make a line that is even tighter and even slimmer than it is possible for you to make with a single mark from the brush. You can see here that I took the head off because it's really small. It's so hard to actually paint on it with the model on. It's so fiddly. So for you guys to even be able to see, I just took it off. And you can see now that the blue gray is on the wet palette. I didn't apply it on the boot, but off camera I do go back and apply it on the boot. It's not something huge. It's, as I said, basically a single dot on each of those kind of raised stripes towards the tip of the boot. Nothing more than that. So painting this helmet, it's tricky. It is really, really small, and not only is it really small, it is also very, very detailed. I do like what it ends up being. So I do like the look of the end result of this helmet. But to me, there is still an issue. The issue is that when you pop the helmet in, it kind of disappears within all the orange. That means I will like paint the entirety of the color, or like the armor around the helmet to completion, because maybe that's part of why it, at least to me, it looks a bit, well, not great. And if that doesn't fix it, well, I will end up having to go back and paint the helmet in another color. I would probably end up picking like a cold white, something that could be base colored in that blue-gray I have on the palette now, and then highlight it up to white for it to stand out and be a focal point. So I might have to go back and redo it. But even then, I actually think, well, I did some learning. So sometimes you have a vision of what you want things to look like, and you like set your mind to it, you paint it, you spend the time, you look at it, you're not convinced. You tweak a bit and see if it works, and sometimes you can get it to work, but definitely also sometimes you can't. And well, two things: either you can live with it looking not quite how you wanted it to, or you can go and fix it. That, I mean, depends on what this paint job is supposed to be or do, basically. Obviously, if it's for competition, well, you'll have to change it. If it's for display, yeah, you can see here I'm down to an Artist Opus 00 now. If it's for display, you might not want to fix it, just learn from the mistake, quote unquote, and keep that in mind for, well, next time you paint something similar. But also you might want to actually fix it. I think that depends on the kind of like person you are, and I mean, personally, I have a very hard time not being annoyed by the look of something that I feel is off, even if it is just for me and for no one to really see. It will kind of annoy me to the point that I'll go back and fix it. So yeah, that really depends on on who you are, what kind of painter you are. So yeah, that was a long-winded way of saying, yeah, I might have to, even though I do spend some time on painting this, I might have to go and change it all. But in the end, it does show how you can do this thing, how you can paint something black looking, or at least I'd say this, for me, it was not supposed to be black. It was actually supposed to be like a very, very dark magenta. And I think that works out fine. But the principle is basically the same, because I'll talk a bit about painting black armor or leathers or boots or whatever, because it is a bit different from painting other colors. That might not be like something that you think about right away, but it is different in the sense that, let's say you wanted to paint something brown. So you paint it in a base coat, then you put on some mid-tones and maybe some texture or whatever, and you blend things out and you highlight it a bit, and you end up with whatever result that gives you. And well, because you use brown colors, it will look brown. And it might be that you thought you would want it like a dark mahogany or something like that, and it maybe looks more like an oak or a cognac color in the end, but it still looks brown because you've used brown tones. Same goes for blue or for green. If you accidentally over highlight it, of course you can go back and you can glaze it down to cut some of the highlights or midtones, but in general it will still look blue or green. Red is a bit different because red goes into either orange or pink really easily, and purple can be a bit tricky too, because too much of highlight on that and it turns pink too. But black is especially tricky because, and same with white, because for something to look black, you need to have a ton of black showing. Otherwise, it will turn into looking like the color you're basically highlighting with. So in this instance, if I have too much of the magenta showing, it stops looking black and dark, and it just looks magenta, which is fine too if you want that. But if your main goal was to have it look like actual black armor or cloth or whatever, well, you need to have that black showing, and it doesn't mean that you can't put on midtone and highlights. But what I generally find is that I have to go back and I have to cut into that midtone and highlight sometimes a fair bit. You can see here how okay, so this turned a bit bright, so I'm cutting into it, because otherwise it will end up looking basically like a gray helmet, and I'm not really interested in that. So it's a really hard balance. It can help you a bit because you then get to clean up some of the edges. This helmet in particular has some lots of edges and very, very small volumes. And you can see the brush I'm using now, the worn Artist Opus S00 is, there are basically no bristles on it. And it has about the perfect size for painting something like that. It does not hold a lot of paint, which is basically the biggest issue with it, is that it doesn't hold a lot of paint. So it dries out quickly and you have to go back to the wet palette a lot. But if that wasn't an issue, I would paint probably almost exclusively with a brush like this. And on some paint jobs, I almost do paint it, not exclusively, but almost exclusively, the small brush like that. Here you can see I'm dipping back into the black, painting back over. So the video is nearing the end stretch, but I'll talk a tiny bit about the blending and how I use the colors. So on something like this, we don't have a lot of huge volumes at all. It's it's a very, very small, very detailed, which means you're basically left with mainly edges, which is another issue for the whole making it look black, because you want to put light on the edges, edge highlight them. So you want to do that for readability basically. But that means if your percentage wise can only have like maybe 10% of non-black, well, that's going to be hard as there are so many edges. And that's basically why I chose to, okay, well, I'll paint this in a dark, like purple, and have it look like that. But the way I'm applying the paints is I build the midtone and the highlights, then I dial it back a bit with the black or with the that dark magenta mix. And then I kind of neaten up if I need a dot of light here or a dot of light there. So it won't be big strokes of anything, and it won't be like smoothly blended out volumes. But the same thing I'm doing here applies with the bigger brush. So when I blend things out, you can see how I dip into the paint and I swirl a bit at the edge and then I drag it. I do that to make sure that I have enough water in the paint. And when I say enough, this is definitely a rule of thumb, and I'm saying about 50-50 water to paint, like half and half. But it really depends on the opacity of the paint. You want the paint to be thin so as to have it not cover in an opaque layer before you've gone over that layer for at least like 3 times, maybe even a bit more, because that means when you apply the paint to the model, you can control the translucency by dragging. So for example, right there, I want the tip of the nose to be the brightest. So I'm dragging from the bridge down towards the tip. Same here. I'm dragging down towards where I want it to be the brightest. And right here, I'm dragging in towards the, like that edge of on the cheekbone. Because that means it leaves, like when you remove the brush from the model, it is where you leave the most pigment. So it will be the most opaque there. So using the fluidity and translucency of the paint, dragging always in the direction where I want it to be the lightest, not if I'm painting dark over light, but I'm usually painting with a lighter color over the dark. Means that I drag in that direction so that I make sure to deposit the most paint there. You can see right where I touched the brush on the model, right above that swirly area. It became kind of like a tiny like a dot, or you can see that this is very, very small, of course, but it got to be a bit of a tiny blob. You can then blend that out by dragging from further away into that mark. And you can see here how I'm basically pushing the pigment into exactly where I want it to be the brightest. So tiny marks and always dragging the brush in the direction of the light makes for this the easiest and smoothest blends, at least for me. So thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.